Tax exempt status, I mean, that's a privilege. That's really a privilege. And it's been abused by a lot more than Harvard, too. By a lot more than Harvard. So we'll see how that all works out. I don't think they've made a final ruling. I don't believe they've made a final ruling, but it's something that these schools really have to be very, very careful with.
I think Harvard should carry through on a whole set of reform with respect to anti-Semitism, with respect to discipline of students, with respect to widening of perspective, with respect to ensuring compliance with the Supreme Court affirmative action admissions order.
There may be something of a consensus that America's universities have gone a bit off course, but there's anything but agreement on how much, and whether it should be the government bringing about the changes by threatening to cut off funding.
I want to make sure that Harvard does carry through with necessary reform, but gosh, we can't have the government ordering universities around in violation of all the processes that are prescribed by law.
U.S. government subsidies for higher education go back to World War II, when it enlisted the best academic minds to help win the war.
During World War II, when the United States leveraged its scientific excellence and the high-quality scientists we had in universities and some of those that we attracted from abroad.
Christopher Eisgruber is president of Princeton University and a constitutional law expert.
Vannevar Bush realized, a government administrator who was in charge of some of its scientific programs, realized that America had a strategic advantage by being able to do research that the government funded and that universities conducted.
But since that beginning in the 1940s, government funding for universities has mushroomed to more than $100 billion by the 1990s, and all the way up to nearly $250 billion in 2024. Most of this is for Pell Grants and other types of student aid, but $60 billion of that is to support research, particularly in medicine and biotech. Donna Shalala ran the University of Wisconsin in Madison and Miami University, taking time out in between to serve as President Clinton's Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Well, that relationship has built the most globally competitive sector in the United States. And I'm talking about the relationship between universities and the government. It's not just NIH, it's the Defense Department, it's NSF, it's the Department of Energy. It's actually all departments who have invested in our universities.
And what has the United States received in return for all the money it provides academia?
Some people think, wow, we're giving billions of dollars to these Ivy League schools or these great state schools across America. They may have the sense they're sort of like building fancy dormitories with that money. That's not what they're doing. They're hiring researchers. They're trying to, come up with cures for cancer.
Scott Bach is the former chair of the University of Pennsylvania Board of Trustees, coming to it after a career on Wall Street, a story he's just published in his book, Surviving Wall Street.
Penn really developed the mRNA vaccine for COVID. I mean, these are important and valuable things, and it's not like anybody's sort of getting rich off this, right? This is a big effort. And another side benefit really that comes, if you look around Penn, or if you look around the great schools in Boston or Johns Hopkins, you find a whole ecosystem of companies. They're venture companies, they're biotech companies, they want to be close to the campus because they work with the faculty, they hire the students, they're trying to come up with new breakthroughs themselves. So it really is an ecosystem that I think has worked beautifully for America, and I would hate to see that get undone.
It's not just funding for research and programs. In its support for higher education, the federal government also acts as a bank for students, making up 92% of lending for student loans. Mitch Daniels knows the story from serving as the head of Purdue, as governor of the state of Indiana, and as President George W. Bush's budget director.
I think to some extent they may be good candidates for reform or possibly some trimming, but they come with all sorts of strings attached, as does everything else that department does. We'd be better off if the states decided how to spend it, and they could spend it more effectively and efficiently without the burden of the federal oversight.
And even some of the biggest supporters of federal money for colleges and universities admit that there's room for improvement, particularly on issues such as anti-Semitism.
Look, the American public needs to hold colleges accountable on anti-Semitism. I don't know of a college president in this country that hasn't spoken out and tried to take action on anti-Semitism. I certainly have, and everyone I know has. It's a societal problem, but universities have to be even more rigorous and set even stronger standards.
I have been dismayed at the rise of anti-Semitism in the world. Anti-Semitism is clearly a problem in our country and on campuses. And while rare, we've seen manifestations of it on our own campus, and we have to stand steadfastly against anti-Semitism and other forms of hate.
It's not just Harvard. The Trump administration sent letters to 60 universities to inform them that they were under investigation for anti-Semitic harassment and discrimination. To address the issue, the government began freezing funds to some of those universities and went a step further, calling for changes in curriculum, hiring, and even admissions.
A lot of people across the country right now are saying, okay, maybe we give a lot of money to a Harvard, to a Penn, to a Columbia, but we should be able to put some conditions on it. Are they wrong?
Yes, I think they are wrong. I do. I think, look, you can say don't waste the money, don't throw away the money, don't use the money improperly, things like that, sure. But I think they should not try to impose a political perspective, or you should run your school in a certain way, or have governance in a certain way, or diminish the faculty, or sort of craft a student body in a certain way. I don't think that's in anyone's interest. I think the government, frankly, should look at it as we're making an investment alongside these great universities. That investment has paid enormous returns for our country. That's why we lead in every single important industry sector in the world. That's why America is the most prosperous place in the world. Let's not mess that up. That has really worked for us, and let's let that be.
Should we be surprised if the federal government wants to put some strings attached to that level of funding?
It's always had strings attached. Congress has always played a role in what the priorities will be on the National Institutes of Health, on the National Science Foundation, on the investments. For instance, the breast cancer investments by the Defense Department in the future. It's always been seen as bipartisan, and the strings have always been put there, both accountability strings as well as what they should focus on. But it's never been a situation in which you would destroy that infrastructure, which means I don't know where we're going to get the engineers and scientists in the future, or the business leaders, or the artists, if we destroy the infrastructure of higher education.
But what about all that money we hear that some of the big Ivy League schools have stashed away, like Harvard's $53 billion endowment? Couldn't schools use some of that to replace the federal dollars?
People sometimes think about the endowment as something that gets used on a rainy day, like a savings account that you keep off to the side. We spend more than 5% per year of the endowment and have to be able to do that in perpetuity, or we're not able to offer the financial aid that we do to our students, or pay all of our faculty across all of our disciplines, or support the research that we do beyond what comes from federal funding.
What about the private sector? Couldn't it step up to restore funding lost from the government?
There's no way the private sector could substitute for what American research universities are doing now, both on their own and in partnership with the government. And I suspect if you ask the private sector, right, our tech companies or our pharma companies, they would agree with that. And the reason is because we do the kind of long-term research that doesn't have the payoff that's going to matter, the predictable immediate term or medium term payoff that is going to matter to our corporations.
So at this point, there appears to be no easy way out. With the Trump administration's demands for changes in how universities teach, admit students, and hire faculty in direct conflict with prestigious universities like Harvard saying that the government asks too much. Both sides are now asking the courts to resolve the conflict. Both sides say the conflict is about more than just how we teach our children.
This is not just about so-called intellectual life. This is about liberty and freedom and progress. And those ideas are under threat from what is happening. Certainly I've seen in my career, there have been presidents I passionately disagreed with, who I thought were pursuing policies that were severely misguided. But I have never seen a president whose actions I felt were subverting the character of American democracy. If Harvard, with its more than $50 billion endowment, with its network of people who have gone through its schools that include a large number of presidents, a large number of people in the Senate, half the Supreme Court, if Harvard cannot resist this kind of tyrannical encroachment, then I don't know who can.